Hi, welcome to Mental Health Mondays with Dr. David Morgan. Um, Much thanks to Onward Productions for inviting me to do this and for making these recordings possible. I'm a licensed psychologist and a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and this is an opportunity for me to answer your questions regarding mental health issues or the gospel or how the two of them intersect. I love talking about that. I really believe that the gospel of Jesus Christ holds multiple answers to a lot of the mental health issues we face. So if you do have a question, here's how you get in touch with me: onward.mental.health.mondays@gmail.com. And you can write in with your questions and I will do my best to answer them. So we'll get to today's question. This comes from a viewer who says, how do you set healthy boundaries with others? Um, It's a great question and applicable in many, many situations. If you have a relationship with someone, you've probably had to set a boundary at some point. In this viewer's case, she specifically asks about how to set boundaries with someone who has borderline personality disorder. I'll answer the question in a more general framework because setting boundaries with anyone basically involves the same process. It doesn't matter whether they have a personality disorder or not. For those of you who don't know, personality disorders are it's a subset of psychiatric disorders, and they are just kind of these lifelong behavioral problems that are highly resistant to change. Borderline personality disorder is one of the personality disorders, and it is characterized by a lot of emotional upheaval, um, relationship issues. Sometimes there's self-harm or suicidal ideation involved. It can be really challenging to work with these people. And they're in a lot of distress as well, people that suffer from this condition. So it's just kind of distress all around. If you have borderline personality disorder, or if you love someone and are working with someone who has borderline personality disorder, it's just a great challenge. And in reality, there's no difference in setting a boundary with someone who has a personality disorder and setting a boundary with someone who is just of average functioning or doesn't have any significant mental health issues. The principles are the same. So let's talk about this. One of the falsehoods is that that the setting and maintenance of boundaries depends upon the other person. Saying, why can't I set a healthy boundary with this person? What's wrong with them that makes it so that I can't set a healthy boundary? That's incorrect. Boundary setting and boundary maintenance begins and ends with us. It can be more difficult to do with other people, but when boundaries fall apart, it's not because other people do something, it's because we've done something to create a lapse in that boundary. So that's what we'll talk about today. And I just have as an example, which will probably be familiar to anyone who has children or knows someone who has children. Let's say that as a parent, you have a toddler and you set a boundary that he is to go to bed at 7 o'clock p.m. Well, it's easy to set that boundary. You decide, you say, hey, you're going to bed at 7. You tell him that at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and he says, fantastic. He doesn't really think anything about it. He's only thinking about the next 5 minutes anyway. The problem comes at 7:01 when he starts to throw a fit because you've put him to bed. So then what do you do in that situation? Setting the boundary was easy. Now maintaining the boundary is what's difficult. If as a parent you give in at that point and let the kid stay up, you can't blame that on the kid. That's on the parent. You can say, oh, it was too difficult. It was causing too much grief. I didn't have enough emotional energy to maintain the boundary at that time. All that's great. And those are decent reasons, but you can't blame the child for that. That is your responsibility in setting and maintaining that boundary. So but one of the challenges is if you set the boundary and don't maintain it, that child learns very quickly that all he needs to do when it comes to another boundary is just throw a fit and you'll give in. Children learn that, adolescents learn that, and adults learn that. Everybody learns that. If you do not hold firm to your boundaries, people learn very quick that all it takes is a certain bit of manipulation and you will drop the boundary. So again, that boundary maintenance is on us. It is not on other people. So why do we fail to enforce the boundaries? Usually we're good at setting them. It's just the enforcing that happens. Well, here's a few ideas. Sometimes people have a problem saying no. They don't want to say no. They don't want to be the bad guy. They don't want people to think poorly of them. Some people crave praise. Some people fear rejection. All kinds of reasons why they don't want to say, no, I'm not going to do that, or here's a limit that I need to set. If you're the type of person that has a challenge doing that, um, then even setting and definitely maintaining boundaries is going to be very difficult for you. So you have to kind of get into, why are you having a hard time saying no? What is it about yourself that makes that process difficult? And like I said, it could be any number of reasons. And I don't know what the reasons are. They're going to be different for everyone. So you have to kind of give that a lot of thought and say, why am I having difficulty saying no in this situation? Really analyze that, and then see if your reasons are valid. Maybe they are valid. A lot of times they're not. And if we're doing things for kind of, what's the right word? Not necessarily invalid, but for, I can't think of the word. I want to say irresponsible reasons, then we're going to have greater problems in that. So that's the first thing, is not being able to say no. I think that's one of the reasons why we have trouble setting and keeping boundaries. Another issue is lack of confidence in the boundary that we set. Let's go back to the example of the parent who sets the 7 o'clock bedtime for their child. 7 o'clock rolls around, the child throws a fit, and then the parent starts to think, was I wrong in setting a boundary of 7 o'clock? Maybe 7 o'clock's a bad time to go to bed. Maybe this 3-year-old really knows more about bedtime than I do, and I shouldn't have set that thing. So maybe we need to talk about this. I see this happen a lot in parents where they just really lack confidence in their abilities, and then there's this kind of endless negotiation with their children. I'm not saying negotiation is a bad thing, and sometimes negotiation is a very, very good thing, but not everything is negotiable. And as parents, you have to set limits, even as not just as parents, but with other people. You have to set limits, and not every limit is negotiable. You decide for yourself which ones are negotiable and which ones aren't. But if the person that you're setting the boundary with learns that everything is negotiable with you, then everything's going to become a fight, and they're going to push every single time. And if you lack confidence in the boundary that you've set, then you will start to negotiate, and you'll say, okay, well, maybe this is a better thing. Let's say you have a rule, you have a house guest, and you say no smoking in the house. Say the person smokes, and you say no smoking in the house. And then they say, well, that's not fair, and that's a violation of my rights. And you say, okay, well, you can smoke in the garage. Well, it's cold in the garage. Well, okay, you can smoke in the family room with the door closed, or the bedroom with the door closed, but only during these hours. You see where I'm going? And you see how that ends up, that slow breach of your boundary, because you lack confidence in your boundaries. You have to have confidence in the things that you decide to do. So that's the second issue. The third issue is this belief that somehow setting boundaries is unchristlike. It is not unchristlike to set a boundary. Jesus Christ set boundaries all the time, and he still sets boundaries. What do you think commandments are? Commandments are boundaries. They are limits. He says, thou shalt not do this, or thou shalt do this. When he was alive, or when he was alive on the earth, he set boundaries with other people. He said, you will do this, or you will not do this. Jesus Christ was the most loving, tolerant, and sensitive, and still is the most loving, tolerant, and sensitive person of all time. And yet he sets boundaries. So sometimes people like to convince us that if you set a boundary, if you set a limit, then you're not being accepting and tolerant. You can be accepting and tolerant and set a boundary at the same time. It's totally possible. It has to be done with love, and it has to be done with understanding, but you can set that limit. And Jesus Christ is a great example of that. Okay, so to recap, so remember, setting and maintaining boundaries has everything to do with you. It does not have to do with the other person. Other people can make it difficult for you to maintain your boundaries, no question. But if you loosen your boundary because of what someone else did, you can't blame that on them. That's on you. You're the one that has the control of that. So three things to consider. Number one, it's okay to say no. And if you're going to set boundaries, you have to learn to say no. Number two, you need to be confident in the reasons behind your boundaries, so when they get challenged, you don't back down. And number three, remember that it is Christ-like to set boundaries, but we need to set those boundaries in harmony with what we know about Jesus Christ and his doctrine and what he's taught. So it needs to be done with kindness and love and understanding. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. I hope you find these things helpful. I'd love to hear your feedback as well. If you need to get in touch with me, you can, again, go back to the email at the beginning of the video, or you can find me on Instagram at LDS Psychologist, or on my website at www.ldspsychologist.com. And always remember that change is possible, but that change requires action and to keep moving forward. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.